A single bead can hold a civilization inside it. This small object, often overlooked, carries the weight of human history across thousands of years and every continent. We are about to trace the incredible journey of beads from ancient African marketplaces to Native American ceremonial grounds and along the sprawling Silk Road. You will discover how these tiny artifacts were not just decorations but powerful tools used as money, spiritual protectors, and bold statements of identity. How could something so small become a universal language of meaning? We will decode the hidden stories in glass, stone, and shell, revealing how beads connect us all. By the end, you will see the entire tapestry of human civilization through this one surprising lens. What common object in your own life might be hiding a secret history? Deep in the cool darkness of Blombo's cave in South Africa, archaeologists unearthed a startling clue to our ancient past. They found small, carefully drilled shells, each one polished and worn smooth from being handled and hung. These are not random shells, they are beads, and they are more than 100,000 years old. This discovery pushes the very origin of complex human culture back in time, long before the first pyramids or written words. The individuals who made these beads were doing something revolutionary. They were not just surviving, they were creating symbols. By choosing to wear these objects, they were making a statement about who they were, perhaps which family or band they belonged to, or what spiritual forces they honored. The effort required was immense. Imagine the patience needed to drill a perfect hole through a tiny ostrich eggshell fragment or a piece of ivory using only stone tools. This was not a casual pastime. It was a dedicated craft, a sign that our ancestors had developed a shared language of adornment. What could possibly compel a person living on the edge of survival to invest so much time in creating beauty? The answer seems to be a fundamental human need to connect, to belong, and to be seen. These earliest beads are the first whispers of identity, the foundation upon which every culture would later build its own unique visual language. From this African beginning, the idea of the bead would travel with humanity, evolving into ever more intricate forms as it reached new lands and new minds. From those first symbolic shells in Blombo's cave, the story of beads in Africa exploded into a complex language of power, faith, and commerce. Across the continent, beads became woven into the very fabric of society, far surpassing simple decoration. In the legendary kingdoms of Ghana, Mali, and Benin, beads were a primary form of currency, a tangible display of royal authority, and a vital medium for spiritual communication. Vast trade networks, some stretching across the immense Sahara Desert, moved intricate glass and stone beads like precious gems. A specific color or pattern was not merely a fashion choice, it was a bold statement of identity and status. The iconic powder blue aggrey beads of West Africa, for instance, were so incredibly valuable they were often considered equal to their weight in gold. But their worth was not purely economic. These same beads were believed to hold powerful protective qualities, shielding the wearer from harm. Historians like John Picton explain how beads were integral to every major life event. During a wedding or a coronation, the presentation of specific beads marked a profound transition, solidifying social bonds and new responsibilities. The production of these treasured objects was itself a sacred act. In centers like Isle Ife in Nigeria, the techniques for creating beautiful glass beads were highly guarded secrets, known only to master artisans. This created objects that were simultaneously a form of money, a work of art, and a sacred relic. The bead was a complete unit of value, blending the material and the spiritual into one powerful object. This deep, complex relationship made African beadwork a dynamic force that shaped history for centuries, a tradition of immense weight that was about to meet another great bead-working culture, a story that carries us north across the Mediterranean Sea. While African kingdoms traded in glass and gold, a different kind of treasure was moving across ancient Europe. From the cold shores of the Baltic Sea, a golden river of amber beads flowed south along trade routes that stretched all the way to the warm Mediterranean. This fossilized tree resin, warmed by the hand, was believed to capture the power of the sun itself, a magical amulet for protection and healing. These beads were more than ornaments. They were the currency of a continent-wide network, linking the distant north with the classical civilizations of Greece and Rome. But a deeper transformation was on the horizon, one that would reshape the very purpose of a bead. With the rise of Christianity, the bead was reinvented from a pagan charm into a sacred tool for devotion. The Rosary emerged as a string of beads that made prayer a physical, rhythmic act. Each bead moved through the fingers represented a specific prayer, a way for the faithful, many of whom could not read, to structure their meditation and connect directly with the divine. Promoted by religious figures like Saint Dominic, this practice turned a simple string into a portable chapel, a way to carry one's faith and focus the wandering mind. How did a string of beads become a cornerstone of faith for millions? It made the abstract tangible, giving hands and heart a shared rhythm in worship. This demand for devotional objects fueled an artistic revolution in places like Venice. On the island of Murano, master glassmakers guarded their secrets as fiercely as any state secret, perfecting the creation of incredibly detailed glass beads. These vibrant, colorful objects, known as trade beads, were initially made for European markets, but their destiny would be on a much larger stage. The European bead had proven its remarkable adaptability, shifting from a symbol of ancient magic to one of structured faith. This same quality of reinvention would become the hallmark of its journey to a new world, where it would encounter cultures with their own deep and powerful bead traditions. Yet the European transformation of beads was just one act in a much grander drama unfolding along the ancient Silk Road. This legendary network of trade routes was not merely a path for silk and spices. It was a vibrant highway for the exchange of ideas, carried on the backs of camels in the form of countless beads. Chinese glass beads, the deep blue lapis lazuli from Persian mines, and fiery red carnelian from India traveled thousands of miles, their value often increasing with every step they took from their source. These small, durable objects became perfect agents of cultural exchange, silently transmitting artistic styles, technologies, and even spiritual beliefs between the great civilizations of East and West. A Roman mosaic bead with its intricate geometric pattern might eventually find itself in a Chinese workshop, inspiring local artisans to experiment with new designs. Conversely, Chinese expertise in glassmaking traveled westward, influencing techniques in Central Asia. Historians such as Peter Francis Jr. have traced how bead styles were constantly imitated and adapted, creating beautiful hybrid forms that bore the fingerprints of multiple cultures. A single bead could embody a conversation between a Persian glassblower and a Chinese merchant, a dialogue that spanned continents. What do these tiny travelers reveal about the ancient world? They tell a story of a surprisingly interconnected globe, a pre-modern web of globalization where a shared visual language of adornment flourished. This constant flow set the stage for a remarkable contrast, for while beads were circulating freely across Eurasia and Africa, another hemisphere was developing its own profound and isolated bead traditions, entirely independent of the Old World's bustling exchange. Across the vast oceans, far from the Silk Road's bustling caravans, the Americas nurtured bead traditions of profound spiritual depth. Long before European contact, indigenous peoples from the Arctic to the Andes were creating a vibrant visual language from the land itself. They transformed turquoise from southwestern mines into sacred offerings, believing it connected the earth to the sky. In the woodlands, intricate quillwork from porcupines adorned clothing with symbolic patterns long before glass beads arrived. For nations like the Lakota, Navajo, and Wampanoag, every bead placed was a word, and every pattern a sentence in an ongoing story. A single piece of regalia could tell of a family's history, a warrior's bravery, or a community's relationship with the spiritual world. The colors were a deliberate vocabulary, white for peace or the spirit world, blue for the life-giving sky or water, and red for the blood of life or the sacred earth. This was not art for art's sake. It was a living library of cultural knowledge, meticulously stitched and passed from elder to child. Then, in the 16th century, a new material arrived on sailing ships and trading posts, European glass beads, often called pony beads for the pack animals that carried them. Instead of replacing their own traditions, indigenous artists saw these new, uniformly colored beads as an expansion of their palette. They masterfully adapted the foreign material, weaving it into their established symbolic frameworks. The vibrant floral patterns that emerged among the Great Lakes tribes are a stunning example, a new artistic form born from the fusion of introduced materials and deeply rooted cultural vision. How did a foreign object become a powerful tool for expressing an indigenous worldview? It speaks to a remarkable resilience, the ability to absorb new elements and reshape them into something uniquely meaningful. This creative adaptation ensured that the stories continued, the identities remained strong, and the spiritual connection to the land was reaffirmed with every new stitch. But this deep spiritual connection found a powerful parallel in the intricate world of status and power. In the imperial courts of China, the most revered bead was not made of glass or shell, but of jade. For thousands of years, jade was considered more precious than gold, a substance that embodied the highest virtues of purity, moral integrity, and even immortality. Emperors and nobles were often buried in suits composed of thousands of meticulously carved jade beads, linked with gold or silk thread, in the belief that the stone would protect their body from decay and guide their soul into the afterlife. The craftsmanship required to work this incredibly hard stone was extraordinary, a skill passed down through generations of master artisans. The quality of a single jade bead, its color, its translucency, and the perfection of its carving could instantly communicate the wearer's immense wealth and social standing. Art historians note how specific colors and materials were strictly regulated by sumptuary laws, ensuring that only the imperial family could wear the most brilliant yellow jade, a color associated with the emperor himself. Why have beads remained so central to both spiritual and ceremonial life in Asia for millennia? Their enduring presence points to a universal human need for tangible symbols, objects we can hold in our hands to represent the abstract concepts we hold in our hearts, whether it is a prayer for enlightenment or the weight of earthly authority. This dual role as a tool for inner peace and a marker of outer power reveals the bead's incredible versatility, a quality that would be tested on a global scale as these objects became entangled with the forces of empire and colonization. This profound connection between adornment and eternity found one of its most complete expressions along the banks of the Nile. In ancient Egypt, a bead was far more than jewelry. It was a charged object, a key for unlocking the dangers of the afterlife. Egyptians lived with one eye fixed on eternity, and their beads were crafted with that ultimate journey in mind. The most stunning examples were the broad collars, known as wesek, that adorned the necks of pharaohs and elites. These massive, radiant collars were not light. They were composed of thousands of tiny faience beads, a glazed ceramic that shimmered in brilliant blues and greens. These colors were not chosen at random. Blue represented the life-giving Nile and the heavens, while green symbolized fertility and the promise of rebirth. To wear such a collar was to drape oneself in the very forces of creation and regeneration. But the power of beads went deeper than these magnificent displays. Individual beads carved from specific materials were believed to hold potent magic. A bead of lapis lazuli with its deep celestial blue was a conduit to the gods. Carnelian, the color of blood and the desert sun, was thought to provide vitality and protection. Gold was the flesh of the gods, imperishable and divine. This belief in their protective power made beads absolutely essential in death. Mummies were often covered with intricate nets made of faience beads, a symbolic armor to shield the body from evil spirits on its perilous path. Within the linen wrappings, priests carefully placed beaded amulets, the most famous being the scarab beetle, which was placed over the heart to ensure it would not testify against the deceased in the final judgment. The scale of this demand was immense. The production of faience beads was a major state-sponsored industry, with workshops churning out millions of beads to supply temples, the royal court, and the entire funerary trade. How did this belief elevate a simple bead to an object of divine significance? It transformed a craft into a sacred act. Every bead strung was a prayer made solid, a small piece of magic intended to ensure that life, in some form, would truly continue forever. This Egyptian vision of beads as eternal guardians created a legacy that would ripple across the Mediterranean, influencing the rituals and regalia of neighboring cultures for centuries to come. The cool, dark chambers of Egyptian tombs gave way to the sun-drenched islands and coastlines of the Mediterranean, where beads took on a new life. On the island of Crete, Minoan artisans created a world in miniature. They shaped gold into delicate beads resembling octopuses with swirling tentacles and bees with finely detailed wings. They carved semi-precious stones into vibrant crocus flowers and double-headed axes, symbols of their vibrant, nature-honoring culture. These were not just decorations. A necklace of such beads was a wearable piece of Minoan belief, a reflection of a society deeply connected to the sea, the land, and the power of the goddess. When their civilization faded, the classical Greeks that followed brought a different aesthetic. Their beads often served a supporting role in jewelry designed around ideals of balance and mathematical proportion. Simpler gold spheres or carved carnelian beads might accent a pair of finely wrought earrings, their beauty found in their harmonious placement rather than intricate individual shapes. Yet beads still held sacred purpose, left as humble offerings at temples to ask for a god's favor or to give thanks for an answered prayer. Then came the Romans, masters of engineering and scale. They looked at a bead and saw not just an object of beauty, but an opportunity for industry. Utilizing their revolutionary technique of glass blowing, Roman workshops could produce thousands of identical, brightly colored glass beads in a single day. They perfected mosaic glass, fusing together thin rods of different colored glass to create intricate patterns that could then be sliced into countless identical discs. This was bead production on an industrial level, the first of its kind. These beads were not just for the Roman elite. They were traded to the farthest reaches of the empire and beyond, reaching the hands of people who had never seen a Roman soldier. A simple blue glass bead found in a British grave or a Germanic village became a tiny, silent ambassador of Roman technology and taste. So what does this Mediterranean evolution reveal? It charts a clear path from the unique, symbolic artifacts of the Minoans, made for ritual and elite status, to the Greek appreciation for beads as elements of a larger harmonious design, and finally to the Roman mass-produced commodity. The bead was becoming democratized, moving from the exclusive domain of priests and kings to something a common soldier's wife might own. This shift towards accessibility would echo for centuries, setting a precedent for how a simple object could bridge vast social and geographic divides. The Roman industrial production of glass beads had a powerful predecessor, one whose influence flowed not from legions but from merchant ships. The Phoenicians, a civilization built on the sea, became the ancient world's most effective distributors of glass. From their coastal cities like Tyre and Sidon in modern-day Lebanon, these master sailors navigated the entire Mediterranean, establishing trading posts that became conduits for goods and ideas. Their greatest contribution was not just in moving beads, but in perfecting the art of making them. They developed a remarkable skill for creating translucent and vividly colored glass beads, a technology they guarded as fiercely as any state secret. This knowledge was their economic lifeblood, a monopoly that gave them a tremendous advantage for centuries. How do we understand a people who left behind so few written records? Their story is written in the objects they traded. The most telling of these are their distinctive eye beads. These intricate glass beads featured concentric circles that resembled a watchful eye, an almost universal symbol believed to deflect evil glances and malicious spirits. The widespread discovery of these beads from Carthage in North Africa to ancient Iberia physically maps the vast expanse of Phoenician trade routes. Each bead found in a distant grave or settlement is a silent testament to a journey taken, a connection made. This tangible evidence proves that cultural influence can be measured in more than just carved monuments and written scrolls. The Phoenicians demonstrated that a small, mobile trading culture could weave together the ancient world, stitching continents together with a thread of vibrant glass. Their legacy set a pattern that would be repeated by merchant cultures for millennia, proving that the most enduring empires are sometimes built not on conquest, but on commerce and a brilliantly crafted bead. Far from the glass furnaces of the Mediterranean, the ocean itself became the source of the most valued beads. Across the vast islands of Oceania, where immense distances were bridged by voyaging canoes, treasure was not forged in fire but pulled from the sea. The most famous of these treasures was the Kina shell, a luminous gold-lipped pearl oyster shell painstakingly shaped into a crescent. In the highlands of Papua New Guinea, these shells were the very definition of wealth, a primary currency used for everything from securing a marriage through a bride price to settling disputes and forging political alliances. But to call them mere money would be to miss their true power. A single kina was dense with social meaning. Its value was not fixed by a government but by a consensus of rarity, size, and the incredible skill required to work the shell without cracking it. The process was an art form involving hours of grinding, polishing, and drilling to create a smooth, wearable valuable. Similarly, in Fiji, pendants made from the teeth of sperm whales or spotted dolphins served as potent symbols of chiefly status and spiritual power. Why did these shell-based systems of value persist so strongly, even after European traders arrived with seemingly superior metal tools and coins? The answer lies in a fundamentally different understanding of economics. Anthropologist Marilyn Strathern explains that in many oceanic societies, the exchange of these shell valuables was less about simple purchase and more about weaving a web of social bonds. This is often called a gift economy, where the act of giving creates an obligation, a relationship that must be honored in the future. When a kina shell changed hands during a bride price ceremony, it was not a payment for a person. It was a tangible acknowledgement of the new connection between two families, a debt of respect and mutual support that would last for generations. The shell's value was inseparable from its history of previous owners and the social ties it represented. This deep cultural embeddedness made metal coins seem hollow and impersonal by comparison. The enduring power of shell beads in Oceania offers a profound lesson that what a society chooses to value reveals its deepest priorities, placing human relationships above abstract financial worth. This golden web of social bonds spun from shells and teeth would soon be tested by a new kind of currency arriving on European ships. The age of exploration weaponized the bead, turning it from a symbol of connection into a tool of acquisition. Venetian and Dutch factories mass-produced billions of glass trade beads, specifically designed as cheap currency for foreign markets. These beads, vibrant and novel, became the sharp edge of economic imperialism. Explorers like Christopher Columbus documented using red caps and glass beads to trade with the Taino people for precious goods. In North America, the Dutch West India Company exchanged vast quantities of beads for Manhattan Island, a transaction that would become infamous for its staggering inequality. The pattern repeated across continents, with European traders offering strings of beads for African gold, ivory, and, tragically, even human lives in the slave trade. The exchange was fundamentally asymmetrical, a calculated system where manufactured trinkets were swapped for irreplaceable resources and freedom. But the story does not end with simple exploitation. In a powerful act of cultural resilience, many indigenous communities subverted the intended purpose of these beads. They did not see them as cheap substitutes, but as a new palette for their ancient artistic language. Across the Americas, artists incorporated the bright, uniform glass beads into their traditional designs, creating stunning new art forms that asserted their identity. The vibrant floral patterns of the Great Lakes tribes and the intricate beadwork of Plains tribes on moccasins and ceremonial regalia are testaments to this creative reclamation. What does this complex history reveal? It forces us to hold two contradictory truths at once. A trade bead can be a stark symbol of colonial greed, a tiny monument to a devastating power imbalance. Yet, in the hands of a master artist, that same bead can become an act of resistance, a stitch in the enduring fabric of a culture that refused to be erased. This duality is the uncomfortable legacy of the trade bead, an object that encapsulates both the brutality of encounter and the astonishing human capacity to create beauty from oppression. Machinery now took up the ancient craft of the bead maker. In the smoky glassworks of 19th-century Bohemia, inventors perfected devices that could press and cut glass into countless identical beads with astonishing speed. This was a revolution in miniature, one that ripped the bead from its deeply rooted past. For the first time in history, nearly anyone could afford a string of brightly colored glass beads. They cascaded into the mass market, adorning the hats and dresses of factory workers and socialites alike, sparking a boom in popular fashion. But this new accessibility came at a profound cost. The bead, once a handcrafted object imbued with the spirit of its maker and the specific beliefs of a community, was stripped of its cultural skin. A bead from Bohemia looked exactly like a bead from Birmingham, a perfect copy with no story of its own. Its value was no longer tied to sacred protection or social rank, but to the whims of the season's trends. How did this industrial shift alter our very relationship with the objects we own? It created a fundamental disconnect between an item's meaning and its creation. A person buying a Victorian bead necklace had no connection to the artisan. no understanding of the rituals or resources that once gave such an object its power. The bead became a commodity, its significance floating freely, defined more by advertising and peer pressure than by any deep, inherited tradition. This transformation mirrors a much larger story of the industrial age, where the symbolic weight of our possessions grew lighter even as their quantity grew exponentially. The journey from a unique talisman to a disposable trinket raises a pressing question for our own time, as we stand at the brink of a new technological frontier that promises to redefine creation once again. This universal psychological need for tactile focus finds its purest expression in the world's great spiritual traditions. A Catholic nun in a quiet chapel, a Muslim merchant pausing for prayer, a Hindu sage on the banks of the Ganges, each may hold a string of beads. Though the names differ, the Rosary, the Misbah, the Japa Mala, their purpose is strikingly similar. The fingers move from one bead to the next, each tactile click marking a recited prayer, a sacred name, or a moment of mindfulness. This is not a passive act. The rhythmic movement gives the wandering mind an anchor, a physical pathway into a deeper state of contemplation. Why does this simple action work so well across such different faiths? The answer lies in our basic human wiring. The repetitive motion creates a gentle, predictable rhythm that can calm the nervous system, slowing the heart rate and easing anxiety. This allows the individual to turn inward to quiet the internal chatter and achieve a focused state of awareness. The bead becomes a tool for transcending the self, a small, solid object that helps bridge the gap between the physical world and the spiritual. But the power of beads extends far beyond formal prayer. In cultures worldwide, they mark the most significant thresholds of a human life. Among the Maasai of East Africa, elaborate beaded collars are presented to young women during coming-of-age ceremonies, each color symbolizing a specific virtue like purity or bravery. At a Hindu wedding, the Mangal Sutra, a necklace of black and gold beads, is tied around the bride's neck by the groom, a sacred symbol of their lifelong union. And in funeral rites from ancient Egypt to modern times, beads are often placed with the deceased, serving as protective amulets for the journey into the afterlife. In each case, the bead is a tangible marker of an intangible change. It makes the transition visible, solidifying a new social role for the individual and reinforcing the bonds of the community that witnesses it. The common thread weaving through a prayer ritual and a wedding ceremony is the human need to make meaning through repetition and touch. We are creatures who understand the world through our hands as much as our hearts. A bead held and moved gives abstract faith and profound life, changes a shape we can physically grasp, creating a silent, universal language for the most important moments of our lives. A single color can whisper a secret, and a deliberate pattern can tell an entire life story. Long before the written word became common, beads served as a sophisticated, portable language, encoding complex messages through a silent vocabulary of color, shape, and arrangement. This was not a universal language but a deeply local one, understood only by those initiated into its meanings. In the drawing rooms of Victorian England, for instance, a young woman might wear a bracelet strung with specific colored beads. To the casual observer, it was merely a charming accessory, but to a suitor familiar with the code, it was a passionate declaration. A white bead might promise innocence, a red one spoke of courage and love, while a yellow one could signal jealousy or a warning. This floral bead language allowed for a discreet conversation in a society governed by strict etiquette, where direct expression was often forbidden. It transformed personal adornment into a private dialogue, a way to navigate the intricate rules of courtship under the very noses of chaperones. Half a world away, among the Zulu people of southern Africa, beadwork communicated not private romance but public identity. A young woman might create an intricately beaded love letter, known as an ukubu, for her suitor, but the language was far more comprehensive. The colors and patterns woven into her apron or headpiece were a clear public statement. Triangles could represent a married woman, while certain geometric designs might indicate her specific clan. The color white often symbolized purity and spiritual love, green for contentment or fertility, and black for marriage or mourning. An elder could read a person's age, social status, and even their family's history simply by looking at the beadwork they wore. This was a living, evolving language, taught from one generation to the next, ensuring that cultural knowledge was carried forward in a vibrant, wearable form. This impulse to record and remember found another powerful expression in the beadwork of Native American tribes. For the Lakota, a fully beaded band on a dress or a detailed scene on a pipe bag was not just decoration. It was a historical document. A specific pattern might commemorate a successful buffalo hunt, a brave deed in battle, or a significant vision experienced by the wearer. These were personal and communal records stitched into existence with painstaking precision. The act of beading the story was as important as wearing it, a process of meditation and remembrance that embedded the event deep into the individual's and the community's memory. How can a sequence of colored glass or shell hold such dense information? The answer lies in a shared cultural framework. Just as we understand that a red octagon means stop, these communities held a collective agreement on what each symbol represented. The beadwork was a code, but it was an open secret within the group, reinforcing a powerful sense of belonging. To understand the pattern was to be part of the culture. This sophisticated system reveals a fundamental human truth, that we are innate storytellers and symbol makers, constantly seeking ways to compress our experiences into tangible forms that can be carried, shared, and understood across generations. A queen's final slumber became history's great reveal. In the 1920s, archaeologist Leonard Woolley uncovered the royal cemetery of Ur, a Mesopotamian city from 4,500 years ago. The tombs held a staggering sight. The bodies of queens like Puabi were literally draped in history, wearing elaborate headdresses constructed from thousands of gold, lapis lazuli, and carnelian beads. This was not merely wealth on display, it was a complex language of power written in stone and metal. The very presence of lapis lazuli, a stone that could only be sourced from distant Afghanistan, spoke volumes. It was concrete proof of trade routes that spanned thousands of miles, connecting empires that flourished millennia ago. Each bead in that headdress was a testament to an incredibly sophisticated network of artisans, miners, and merchants, a global economy operating in the ancient world. But these royal treasures are only one part of the story. On the other side of the world, in the arid river valleys of Peru, the Moche culture left behind equally telling evidence. Their burial sites contain beads made from exotic spondylus shell, a vibrant orange mollusk that thrives only in the warm waters off the coast of Ecuador. Finding these shells in Peruvian graves confirms that the Moche engaged in long-distance maritime trade, braving the Pacific Ocean to acquire materials they considered sacred. A single bead, therefore, is never just a bead to an archaeologist. It is a data point. A bead found in a simple hunter-gatherer campsite might suggest seasonal migration patterns or a chance encounter with a distant group. A king's full regalia, like that at Ur, maps an entire political and economic landscape. But what happens when we look beyond the bead itself to the invisible traces it leaves behind? New technologies are allowing scientists to do just that, extracting stories from the microscopic level. Residue analysis can now detect ancient plant fibers or animal sinew that once strung the beads together, telling us about the local environment and technologies used. Even more revolutionary is isotopic sourcing, a technique that analyzes the unique chemical fingerprint of a material. By studying the isotopes in a turquoise bead, for example, researchers can often pinpoint the exact mine it came from, sometimes with startling precision. This turns a beautiful object into a precise geographic marker, revolutionizing our understanding of ancient travel and trade. These scientific methods are allowing us to read the invisible history written on and within each tiny artifact, transforming a collection of beautiful objects into a detailed map of human connection. That silent chemical history within a bead only comes to life through the human hand. The true magic lies not in the material itself, but in the generations of skill required to transform it. Consider the Venetian glassmaker on the island of Murano, a figure surrounded by intense secrecy. His art was lampworking, a dance with fire where he would precisely heat a rod of glass until it glowed like molten honey. Wrapping the viscous glass around a metal rod, he would then shape it with simple tools, breathing life into tiny animals, intricate flowers, or perfect chevron patterns, all before the glass cooled and hardened forever. This knowledge was so valuable that revealing the secrets of glassmaking was once a crime punishable by death. The workshop was a sanctuary, and the techniques were a sacred inheritance, passed from parent to child over centuries. This pattern of guarded mastery repeats across the globe. In China, artisans faced a different challenge confronting jade, one of the hardest stones on Earth. To carve a single, perfect bead required weeks or even months of laborious grinding using abrasive sands and simple bow drills. The process was a test of will, a meditation where the artist had to work with the stone's natural grain and flaws, respecting the material's spirit as much as shaping its form. Far away on the North American plains, Native American beadwork embodied a different kind of patience. Artists, often women, would sit for hours at a loom, weaving intricate patterns one tiny glass bead at a time. Each stitch was a deliberate act, a word in a visual story passed down through families. The designs were not merely decorative, they were prayers, historical records, and maps of identity, with every color and symbol holding specific meaning. The creation of the beads was often a ceremonial act in itself, accompanied by songs or quiet reflection. This deep connection between the process and the product raises a pressing question for our modern world. In an age of instant gratification and machine-made perfection, what is the future of a craft that demands a lifetime to master? The survival of these traditions hinges on a new generation learning to value the story held in a handmade object, to see the decades of skill and cultural memory that a machine cannot replicate. It is a challenge that connects the past directly to the present, asking us what we choose to carry forward. A necklace is never just an accessory, it is a portable autobiography. This deep connection between beads and identity operates on two powerful levels, the intimately personal and the broadly collective. On one hand, a single string of heirloom beads passed down from a grandmother carries the weight of memory, a tactile link to a specific person and a personal past. Wearing it is a quiet, daily act of remembrance, a way of keeping an ancestor close. On the other hand, the deliberate choice of modern beads can signal belonging to a contemporary tribe, whether it is the polished stones of a wellness enthusiast or the vibrant plastic of a music festival goer. These choices are silent proclamations of who we are and who we wish to be seen as. This personal expression scales up dramatically to define entire communities. The elaborate, multi-layered collars worn by the Maasai of East Africa are a perfect example. Each color in their intricate patterns is a word in a shared language: white for purity, red for bravery and unity, blue for the sky and the energy of life. To see a group of Maasai adorned in their beadwork is to witness a walking declaration of cultural pride, a collective identity made stunningly visible. Similarly, the vibrant floral and geometric beadwork on traditional Ukrainian costumes, known as vyshyvanka, does more than decorate. It maps a regional heritage with patterns specific to particular villages, encoding history and belonging into every stitch. This very power of beads to so clearly signal identity leads us directly to a critical modern question. In a world where fashions are globally exchanged with a click, where does respectful cultural appreciation end and harmful appropriation begin? The difference often lies in context and consent. Wearing a piece of beadwork purchased directly from a Maasai artisan who shares the meaning behind the symbols is an act of appreciation that supports the culture. But mass-producing a cheap imitation of that same design for a fast fashion chain, stripping it of all its meaning for a fleeting trend, becomes an act of erasure. It takes a sacred vocabulary and reduces it to an empty pattern. Navigating this dilemma requires a conscious shift from simply wearing an object to understanding its story. It asks us to pause and consider the generations of skill, the spiritual significance, and the living community behind the beautiful pattern we are drawn to. This mindful engagement transforms a potential act of taking into an opportunity for connection and respect. It acknowledges that the most beautiful thing about a bead is rarely its color or shape, but the human hands and the enduring culture that gave it meaning. The value of a bead has always been a story we tell ourselves. In the earliest economies before coins or paper, rare shells and painstakingly crafted stones became one of the first forms of money. Their worth was anchored in something tangible, the immense difficulty of finding the material and the skilled labor required to shape it. A single aggrey bead from West Africa or a polished kina shell from Papua New Guinea represented weeks of dangerous diving, meticulous grinding, and generational knowledge. This was value you could hold in your hand, a portable store of wealth that was durable, divisible, and widely accepted within a cultural sphere. These beads were not just currency, they were the engine of local commerce, facilitating trade for food, tools, and alliances, and enabling the first long-distance exchanges that connected distant communities. This local system of value was eventually overtaken by a global one. The rise of the Venetian glass bead industry marked a pivotal shift. By perfecting mass production, Venetian workshops could flood international markets with beads that were visually stunning but comparatively cheap to make. The value was no longer solely in the material or the artisan's time, but in the novelty and desirability created by sophisticated marketing and trade networks. These beads became a primary currency of empire, used by European trading companies to acquire vast fortunes in resources, from North American furs to African ivory. The bead's role transformed from a local measure of value to a tool of global economic extraction. Today, that journey has reached its logical extreme. Walk into any craft store and you can buy a bag of 1,000 plastic beads for a few dollars, a price so low it severs any connection to the labor of their making. Their value is purely functional, yet at the very same time, a single handmade lampwork bead by a contemporary Murano master or a string of heirloom trade beads authenticated from a specific era can sell for thousands. How can the same category of object hold such wildly different worth? The modern bead market perfectly illustrates our current economic paradox. Value is no longer just about the object itself, but about the story attached to it, the brand, the proven rarity, and especially the cultural capital it confers. A machine-made bead is a commodity, but an artisan bead is a luxury, a piece of art, a connection to an idealized past. This split reflects a broader evolution in economic thought. from valuing the concrete inputs of material and labor to valuing the intangible forces of perception, status, and desire. The humble bead, once a primitive bandnote, now asks us what we truly choose to value in a world of endless copies. The very substance of a bead is its first and most fundamental language. A culture's relationship with the natural world is written in the materials it chooses for adornment. For the ancestral pueblones of the American Southwest, turquoise was not just a pretty blue-green stone. Mined from deep within the earth, it was considered a piece of the sky that had fallen, a sacred bridge between the world below and the heavens above. To wear turquoise was to carry that celestial connection, a form of spiritual protection and a prayer for rain. Half a world away, Chinese philosophers saw a different kind of perfection in jade. They valued this incredibly tough stone not for its brightness, but for its subtle, waxy luster and its cool, smooth touch. Jade embodied the highest Confucian virtues of wisdom, justice, compassion, and modesty. Its durability symbolized eternity, leading emperors to be buried in suits of jade plaques, believing the stone would preserve their bodies for immortality. The material itself was the message. Then came a human-made miracle that shattered this ancient material hierarchy, glass. For the first time, artisans could capture the brilliance of sapphire in cobalt blue glass or the fiery depths of ruby in red. This was alchemy. A skilled glassmaker in ancient Mesopotamia or Egypt could create beads that mimicked the most prized and rare stones, making the power and status they symbolized accessible to a much wider segment of society. The symbolic color blue, once restricted to those who could afford lapis lazuli from a single remote Afghan mine, could now be worn by a merchant's daughter in the form of a vibrant faience bead. Glass democratized symbolism, allowing cultures to play with color and meaning on an unprecedented scale. This revolution reached its peak with the invention of plastic in the 20th century. Here was a material unbound by the limits of geology, capable of being molded into any color or shape with astonishing cheapness. Plastic beads offered a burst of creative freedom and accessibility, showing up in everything from children's jewelry to high fashion. But this new material carried a different symbolic weight. A plastic bead does not age like stone or glass. It does not warm to the touch in the same way. Its very perfection and uniformity can feel impersonal, raising questions about authenticity in a world of copies. Why does a jade bead feel inherently more significant than a plastic one, even if they are the same shade of green? Our deep-seated preference for natural materials speaks to a longing for a connection to the earth and to history. A stone bead contains millions of years of geological time. A shell bead was once part of a living creature. Even a centuries-old glass bead carries the slight imperfections of a human hand. Plastic, by contrast, is a child of the lab, a symbol of our modern disconnect from nature and our embrace of disposability. The materials we valorize reveal a profound cultural truth, that we are drawn to substances that feel authentic, that tell a story of origin, and that promise a kind of permanence our own lives lack. That same power to define identity, once stitched into regalia and heirlooms, found a radical new voice in the 20th century art gallery. Artists began to see beads not as mere craft supplies, but as a potent medium for challenging the very foundations of the art world. They consciously chose a material associated with domestic labor, indigenous traditions, and feminine hobbies, deliberately bringing these marginalized narratives into the hallowed spaces of high art. American artist Lisa Liu achieved this with staggering impact. Her first major work was a life-sized kitchen, an entire domestic space where every surface, from the sink to a box of cereal, was meticulously covered in millions of tiny glass beads. The labor was immense, consuming years of her life. This was the point. By applying such intense, time-consuming craftsmanship to a realm of unpaid women's work, she forced a conversation about value. What kind of labor do we celebrate, and what do we take for granted? The sparkling, seductive surface of the beaded kitchen lured viewers in, only to confront them with profound questions about gender, class, and the invisible work that structures our daily lives. On a different continent, Kenyan-born artist Wangechi Mutu incorporates beads into her collages and sculptures that explore African femininity, post-colonial identity, and the mythologized black female body. She mixes beads with materials like magazine clippings, soil, and synthetic hair, creating hybrid figures that are both ancient and futuristic. The beads in her work act as scars, jewels, and cells all at once, referencing traditional adornment while also speaking to the fragmentation and reconstruction of identity in a globalized world. When beads appear in a Mutu piece, they carry the weight of their long history, from African royalty to tourist trade, complicating the narrative and refusing a simple, romanticized past. This artistic movement directly challenges the old hierarchy that placed oil painting and marble sculpture above textiles and beadwork. By elevating a so-called low craft to the status of high art, these creators force institutions and audiences to reconsider their biases. The intricate, hand-done nature of beadwork insists on the value of slow, mindful creation in an age of mass production. It centers stories that have been historically excluded from the canon, whether they are stories of women's domestic spheres or of African cultural resilience. How does this shift change our perception? It asks us to look deeper. A bead is no longer just a decorative element. It becomes a carrier of critical thought, a tiny vessel for complex ideas about history, power, and who gets to tell their story. This transformation proves that the bead's journey is far from over, its ancient language perfectly suited for the most pressing dialogues of our modern world. A queen's golden headdress might suggest distant trade, but science now reveals the exact path each bead traveled. Archaeometry, the high-tech analysis of ancient materials, is reading the hidden history etched into the very atoms of a bead. A technique called X-ray fluorescence, or XRF, works like a scientific superpower. By shining a harmless beam of X-rays onto a glass bead, researchers can detect its unique elemental signature, the specific cocktail of elements like lead, potassium, and cobalt that went into its recipe. This fingerprint is a dead giveaway. A bead found in Scandinavia with a chemical composition matching glass from a Roman workshop in Egypt is not just a beautiful object. It is a tiny, solid piece of evidence for a 2,000-mile trade route. These analyses are mapping an ancient economy in stunning detail, showing how specific colors of glass requiring rare minerals moved from one production center to another, carrying technological secrets along with them. But what about beads made of stone? Here, isotopic sourcing performs even greater magic. Every geological formation on Earth has a distinct isotopic signature, a subtle variation in the atoms of elements like strontium or oxygen that acts like a geographic barcode. When scientists analyze a turquoise bead from an ancient Pueblo site, they can compare its isotopic signature to those of known turquoise mines across the American Southwest. The results can be breathtakingly precise, often identifying the single mine, sometimes even the specific tunnel where the stone was quarried centuries ago. This turns a collection of beads into a dynamic map of human movement and interaction. What surprising connections are these tools revealing? They have confirmed that trade networks in the Americas were far more extensive than previously thought, with seashells from the Pacific coast reaching deep into the interior continents. Conversely, they have overturned assumptions, proving that some beads thought to be rare imports were actually clever local imitations, showing ancient ingenuity rather than long-distance trade. Each bead becomes a data point in a vast network, proving that these small, durable objects are among the most reliable records we have of the large-scale processes that shaped our world, from economics to exploration. This conversation about power and identity in the gallery leads us directly to a pressing modern dilemma found in fashion boutiques and online marketplaces worldwide. As beadwork from indigenous and other cultural traditions becomes a global aesthetic, the line between admiration and appropriation grows dangerously thin. The core of the issue is not about who can create beauty, but about power and context. When a sacred pattern, one that holds generations of spiritual meaning for a specific community, is copied onto a mass-produced bracelet sold by a fast fashion brand, something vital is lost. The pattern is stripped of its story, its prayers, and its connection to a living people, becoming just another empty decoration. This act can reduce a rich, complex cultural language to a simple trend, perpetuating stereotypes and erasing the very people who gave the art its soul. Yet, the opposite of appropriation is not isolation. Human history is a story of cultural exchange, of ideas and art forms borrowed, blended, and made new. The vibrant floral beadwork of the Great Lakes tribes is a powerful historical example of this, a beautiful fusion of introduced materials and deep-rooted cultural vision. So how do we navigate this? The difference often lies in the principles of respect and relationship. Appreciation begins with education, taking the time to understand the history and significance of a pattern before you wear it. It means acknowledging the source, not just the style. Most importantly, it involves supporting the living culture itself. This can mean purchasing beadwork directly from indigenous or cultural artisans, ensuring that the economic benefits of their craft return to their community. It means listening when community members explain why a certain design is not for outsiders to wear. Ethical engagement transforms a transaction into a relationship. It asks us to see the beadwork not as a commodity to be consumed, but as a testament to a people's resilience and creativity. In a world of instant global access, the most respectful way to honor a bead's journey is to honor the hands and the history that continue to give it meaning. A digital thread now weaves together the ancient and the modern. The internet has ignited a global revival of beadwork, transforming what was once a localized craft into a vibrant, borderless conversation. Online forums, social media groups, and video-sharing platforms have become virtual gathering places where a master beader from a remote First Nations community can share a nearly forgotten technique with an enthusiast in Tokyo. A young artist in Nairobi can learn the intricate peyote stitch from a tutorial created by a retiree in Arizona. This instant access to knowledge has shattered geographical and generational barriers, creating a living library of techniques that ensures even the most specialized skills are not lost but are instead passed on to a new, global generation of makers. This connectivity has also built a sustainable economic bridge. Online marketplaces allow artisans to sell their work directly to an international audience, bypassing traditional gatekeepers and ensuring that the financial rewards for their painstaking labor flow back into their communities. This global storefront has become a powerful tool for cultural preservation, creating a tangible incentive for young people to learn the beadwork of their ancestors, not as a relic, but as a viable and respected profession. Yet, this digital democratization is not without its complexities. When a sacred pattern, deeply rooted in a specific spiritual context, is shared freely across the web, it can quickly become detached from its original meaning. A design that signifies a clan's history in one culture might be downloaded and reinterpreted as a simple geometric pattern in another. does this widespread sharing dilute the cultural specificity that gives the beadwork its deepest power? The answer is not simple. The internet acts as both a preserver and a blender. It offers an unprecedented opportunity for endangered traditions to find new audiences and new practitioners, ensuring their survival. But it also demands a new level of cultural mindfulness from those who participate. The responsibility now falls on the global community to engage not just with the pattern, but with the story behind it. The most respectful digital citizens are those who seek to understand the provenance of a design, to credit its origins, and to recognize that some knowledge is meant to be honored from a distance. This new era challenges us to be more than consumers of beauty, but active participants in a global dialogue, where the click of a mouse can either erode a tradition or help it flourish for centuries to come. The legacy of ancient trade routes now confronts the stark reality of modern industry. The very beauty we create can leave a deep scar on the earth. Open pit mines tear into landscapes to extract stones and metals, while the furnaces for glass beads burn through vast amounts of energy. Even plastic beads, born from fossil fuels, contribute to a growing problem of microplastic pollution in our oceans. The environmental cost of a single strand can be shockingly high, a hidden weight that challenges our appreciation for these tiny objects. In response, a new generation of makers and consumers is asking a difficult but essential question. How can we continue this ancient tradition of adornment without compromising the health of our planet or the well-being of the people who harvest and create? The answer is emerging through a powerful movement towards sustainability and ethical sourcing. Artisans are turning to remarkable recycled materials, transforming discarded glass bottles into vibrant new beads or giving industrial waste a second life as beautiful jewelry. Fair trade cooperatives are ensuring that artisans, particularly in developing nations, receive a living wage for their skills, empowering entire communities and preserving cultural techniques that might otherwise vanish. The choice of material itself is being rethought. There is a growing preference for beads made from renewable resources like togwa nut, also called vegetable ivory, which provides a sustainable alternative to animal products. The journey of a bead, from its raw origin to the finished piece, is becoming a story we are encouraged to know. This push for transparency forces us to look beyond the surface beauty and consider the entire life cycle of the objects we wear. Can a bead be truly beautiful if its creation harmed the environment or exploited a worker? This ethical challenge is not about abandoning beads, but about evolving our relationship with them. It calls for innovation in materials science and a collective commitment to conscious consumerism. The future of this ancient art may well depend on our ability to intertwine aesthetic wonder with ecological and social responsibility, ensuring that the stories beads tell are not just of the past, but of a more thoughtful and sustainable future. From the very first ostrich eggshell bead to the patterns we share online today, the story of beads is, in its entirety, the story of us. It is a narrative written in glass, stone, and shell about our universal desire for beauty, our profound need to connect with one another, and our endless creativity in using symbols to make sense of our world. We have traced their journey across every continent, watching as these tiny objects transformed into money, guided prayers, signified power, and became a canvas for artistic expression. Each culture imbued them with its own unique values, yet the underlying thread remains constant. The enduring power of the bead lies in its perfect simplicity, a vessel capable of holding immense meaning in a form you can hold in your hand and carry with you. As we move forward, perhaps we can carry a new awareness as well, a deeper appreciation for the cultural significance woven into every bead we encounter. Whether it is a string of pearls, a friendship bracelet, or a piece of heirloom jewelry, each one represents a single, vibrant thread in the vast and intricate tapestry of human history. So the next time you see a bead, take a closer look. What secret stories might it be waiting to tell? We would love to hear what you discover. Share your thoughts and your own bead stories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into the mysteries of our past, be sure to subscribe for more.